Let's get started with today's story. They say marriage is built on trust. For years, I thought our foundation was rock solid, unshakable. That was until the cracks appeared, and I found myself staring at the rubble of a life I thought I knew. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Mark. I've been married to Julia for 9 years. We had a comfortable life in a quiet suburban neighborhood. No kids, just us, a golden retriever named Max, and a shared dream of growing old together, or so I thought. About 2 years ago, a young guy named Ethan moved into the house next door. Ethan was 24, a fitness instructor, and annoyingly charming. He had this carefree, almost reckless energy, like he owned the world. At first, I didn't think much of him. Julia and I even invited him over for drinks once when he moved in. He was polite enough, but there was something about him I didn't like. Call it intuition or just plain jealousy. I brushed it off. After all, why would a guy like that matter in our lives? But, oh, how wrong I was. It started subtly. Julia began taking an unusual interest in fitness. She'd always been casually into yoga and running, but suddenly, she was going to the gym 3-4 times a week, and guess where she was going? Ethan's gym. At first, I thought it was great. Good for her. I told myself she seemed happier, more energized, but then the signs started piling up. One evening, while we were watching a movie, I noticed her phone lighting up constantly. Every time it did, she'd glance at it, then quickly turn it face down on the coffee table, as if trying to hide it from my view. It wasn't unusual for her to get texts, but this felt different, almost deliberate. I leaned over, half joking, trying to lighten the mood. "Who's texting you so much, secret admirer?" Julia laughed, but it sounded forced, the kind of laugh that didn't quite match her expression. "Oh, it's just Karen. We're planning a girls' trip for next month." I nodded, pretending to believe her. Karen's always been chatty, but there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. Her smile didn't reach them, and a tightness in her jaw told me something was off. It felt like she was hiding something, but I couldn't put my finger on it. My gut twisted, and a sense of unease settled over me. I didn't say anything more that night, but from that moment on, I started paying closer attention. Over the next few days, the little things began adding up. I noticed that she was spending even more time on her phone, texting or scrolling through it whenever I wasn't looking. She'd sometimes leave the room to take calls, making sure to close the door behind her. It was subtle, but the distance between us was growing, and I could feel it. The next week, I was working from home when I noticed something odd. Julia had told me she'd be out running errands, but as the hours passed, I realized I hadn't heard her come or go. Usually, she would at least text me to let me know if she was running late or if plans had changed, but there had been nothing. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. That alone didn't necessarily mean anything. She could have been busy or caught up, but the oddness of it made my suspicions flare. Later, I decided to take Max for a walk and stretch my legs. When we returned, I glanced toward Ethan's house. That's when I saw her, Julia, sitting on Ethan's porch, laughing about something. She was leaning in as she spoke, her hair catching the sunlight just so. Her body language was too relaxed, too comfortable. Ethan, lounging casually on the porch railing, was clearly enjoying the conversation. They seemed at ease with each other in a way that made my skin crawl. They were close, closer than I was comfortable with. I stopped in my tracks, suddenly feeling a wave of unease wash over me. I didn't want them to notice me, so I quickly turned and moved toward the side of the house, taking a more indirect route to the main door. If I had gone straight, they would have seen me for sure. My heart raced as I carefully made my way inside. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe they were just chatting about the neighborhood or something fitness-related, but the way they seemed so at ease with each other lingered in my mind. Why hadn't she mentioned visiting him that evening? Over dinner, I decided to bring it up. "Hey, Julia," I started casually, spearing a bite of pasta. "What did you do today?" She barely looked up from her plate. "Oh, just ran some errands." "Why?" I set down my fork, my tone still light but probing. "Errands? Funny, because I saw you on Ethan's porch when I took Max out." "What's that about?" Her hand froze midair, her fork hovering over her plate. Oh, that? Ethan just needed a hand moving some stuff around. I stopped by for a few minutes to help. No big deal. Really? Because it seemed like you were there a while, I pressed, leaning forward. Her face flushed, and for a moment, I thought she'd deny it outright. But then she laughed, a nervous, high-pitched laugh. God, Mark, don't make this a thing. Are you seriously suggesting something's going on? I didn't say that, I replied evenly. But you didn't mention it earlier. Strange, don't you think? She slammed her fork down, her tone sharp now. Why do you have to be so suspicious? He's our neighbor. I didn't respond, but her defensiveness spoke louder than any denial could. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Julia seemed distant, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would. I picked up her phone, the same phone she always kept on silent, and unlocked it. It was almost too easy. She'd never changed the password, and the screen lit up immediately. As I scrolled through her messages, my stomach sank. There were texts from Ethan, lots of them. When can I see you again? One read. I miss you already, said another. It felt like a punch to the gut. My hand shook as I scrolled through more, my heart sinking with each new message. She had been lying to me all along. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I had to find out the truth. I needed evidence, something concrete. I couldn't just confront her with a hunch. So, I made a decision that felt wrong but necessary. I installed cameras in the house, a few discreet ones near the front door, the living room, and even a couple in the hallway. I set everything up while Julia was out running errands one afternoon. For the next week, I watched every single clip, every second of footage, and each time I saw something that made my blood boil. Julia was barely ever home when she said she was, and every time she came back from errands, I saw her slipping inside the house with an air of secrecy. Her demeanor was different. It wasn't hard to piece together. Ethan was in and out of our house, and I was the last to know. Then, one afternoon, it happened. I was at work, just finishing up a call, when I received a notification on my phone. It was a new camera feed. I opened it and watched in disbelief as Julia let Ethan into the house. The way he looked at her, the way she smiled back, it was clear they were more than friends. My heart raced. I watched them walk into the living room, chatting for a few minutes before they kissed. My throat tightened, and my fingers went cold as I watched them pull each other toward the bedroom. It was like a bad dream, but I couldn't look away. There was no denying it now. Julia was cheating on me, and I had the evidence to prove it. That night, I watched the footage again and again, hoping that maybe I had misunderstood something, but I hadn't. The truth was there, and it hit me harder each time I saw them together. Ethan, the 24-year-old neighbor, the guy who'd been acting so friendly and harmless, was the man who was now sleeping with my wife. I was crushed. I couldn't take it any longer. I had all the proof I needed, and the anger was building inside me like a storm. So, the next evening, after Julia had returned from shopping, I knew it was time. She walked in, acting as if everything was normal, completely unaware that I had just unraveled the truth. I didn't waste any time. We need to talk, I said, my voice cold and steady. Julia looked up from her phone, her face going pale when she saw the expression on mine. What's going on, Mark? Julia, I began. Do you think we're happy? She looked up, startled. What kind of question is that? I don't know. Lately, I've just felt like something's off, like we're not as connected as we used to be. Her eyes darted to the side. I think we're fine. Why do you ask? I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Because I know, Julia. I know about you and Ethan. Her eyes widened in panic, and she took a step back. What are you talking about? I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the video I'd recorded. The screen lit up with a clip of Julia and Ethan kissing in our living room. It played for a few seconds, the image clear and undeniable. I handed the phone to her. Explain this. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked at the video. What is this? You put cameras in the house. Her voice was shaking now, but she wasn't even trying to deny it. She was just stunned, caught completely off guard. "Yes," I said, my tone unwavering. "I knew something was going on between you and Ethan, and I was right. Here's the proof." I saw the color drain from her face. She stepped back, eyes darting as if trying to escape the reality of what was happening. But there was nowhere to hide. "Mark, please," she started, her voice softer now, pleading. "It's not what you think." "Oh, so you're not sleeping with our 24-year-old neighbor?" I said, my voice sharp. "Because that's exactly what it looks like." I let the silence stretch between us, watching her face for any sign of denial before I pressed on. "You've been lying to me. You've been sneaking around with him behind my back, and now I have all the evidence." Her eyes filled with tears, but she was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice breaking. "I never wanted it to get this far. I didn't plan for any of this to happen." "Really?" I said, the anger starting to boil up inside me again. "You didn't plan for it? Then what the hell is this? You've been seeing him behind my back, lying to me, and now you expect me to just feel sorry for you." She buried her face in her hands. "It was a mistake, Mark. I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed bitterly. "A mistake, Julia? A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. Sneaking around with Ethan for months, that's not a mistake, that's a choice." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. "Why, Julia? Was I not enough for you? Did our life bore you?" "It wasn't about you," she whispered. "It was about me." I felt invisible, unappreciated. "And Ethan, he made me feel alive again." Her words cut deeper than any knife. "So your solution was to betray me, to throw away everything we built for some thrill?" I never meant to fall for him," she whispered, her voice full of guilt. "I didn't want to hurt you, but it happened." "Stop," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "Just stop. I don't need to hear any more of your excuses." There was a long silence between us, the weight of everything hung in the air like a heavy fog. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. The betrayal stung too much. Finally, I spoke again, my voice steady but firm. "I'm done, Julia. I'm filing for divorce." Her face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she might beg me, might try to convince me that it could all be fixed. But she didn't. She just nodded silently, her head hanging low. She knew it was over. We both knew it. After our confrontation, I packed a bag and decided to stay with a friend for a few days. Soon after, I met with a lawyer, and the paperwork for the divorce was filed. I couldn't believe it had come to this. My life had been upended in ways I never could have imagined. The truth was undeniable now, and I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. Julia moved out within a week, taking only a few of her things, clothes, a few sentimental items, but not much. It felt almost too easy for her to walk away. She left me with the weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the images of her with Ethan that I couldn't shake from my mind. In the following months, I tried to keep myself busy, but the silence in the house was suffocating. Max, my loyal companion, seemed to sense the shift, sticking close to me, his presence a small comfort. Eventually, I decided to sell the house. Every corner of it was filled with memories that I couldn't bear to keep. It was time to start fresh. I found a new place, one that felt like a blank slate, where the past couldn't follow me. It wasn't easy getting over the betrayal, the lies, but I knew it was the right choice. The anger, the heartbreak, and the disappointment eventually gave way to something quieter, a resolve. Somehow, I knew I'd be okay. There was peace in not having to question everything, not wondering where Julia was or who she was with. In time, I started to think about the future, my future. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew I was capable of moving on. I'd start over, and this time, I wouldn't be fooled. Thank you for watching.